think there's any shocking name inside that top 15, but are there any teams and maybe their placements that stand out to you?
Yeah, I think anytime the two-time defending national champions aren't ranked number one, and I know they're losing the metrics, the analytics aren't going to like them as much because of the returning production that they're losing. They're losing 100% of their passing volume, obviously, with Stetson Bennett going to the NFL. But having two teams in front of them, especially Alabama, who didn't even win their division last year, in
Mhm.
front of Georgia is a little surprising to me, but outside of that, Texas always seems to jump up into the top 5 or top 10 of these things around this time of year.
Yep.
Michigan being as low as number 6 after they've won the Big Ten in back-to-back years, I'm sure is very interesting to their fan base. But talent and star rankings and returning production, like I said, is a huge, huge factor in these rankings.
I think Alabama being at number 2 is the most shocking to me because if
Yeah.
you go over to DraftKings, and we're going to incorporate some of these over-unders into these teams as we talk about them, the betting favorite is that Alabama goes under the 10.5 win total that's set as their line, which I think I'm inclined to agree with. I think 10 wins is pretty much where I'm going to have Alabama sitting this year. So I think to have them starting off at number 2 ahead of Georgia. The other thing that really stands out to me is the win out percentages. We talked about at the end of the national championship game in that recap video that Georgia's schedule, aside from a game against Tennessee and then, South Carolina and Florida, you can make of them whatever that you will. I think it's looking like South Carolina is going to be the much stronger of those two teams. But we were having to squint to find a loss that kept Georgia out of the playoffs. And I think the general consensus was that they had a really good shot of running the table once again. ESPN disagrees with us, though. The FPI says that they have a 22.4% chance of winning out, while Ohio State has a 34.3% chance of winning out. And then the playoff percentages are 82.2 for Ohio State, 63.1 for Georgia. So it seems like the metrics are saying maybe pump the brakes on this Georgia three-peat campaign.
Yeah, and you do have to take those numbers in context because both that 22.4 and 63.1 are second nationally in both of those categories. So they're the second most likely team nationally to go undefeated, second most likely team nationally to make the playoffs behind Ohio State in both of those. It's really just kind of hedging, I think, at this point
Yeah.
for Georgia because look, the Tennessee game is going to be tough. They have a history of stubbing their toe before these last couple of years, at least once to someone in the SEC East. They have the neutral site game in Florida. That's always going to be a heated rivalry game. There's an
Well, that
opportunity for them
that
to
I was just gonna say that might not be neutral site. They're doing renovations to TIAA Bank Stadium,
this
and
year.
yeah, and
Oh, wow.
there's a chance that won't be neutral site, from what I understand.
Oh, wow. And then, wow. Yeah, hadn't heard that. So, whether that's in Florida or at home, it's going to be a heated rivalry game. So opportunity for that to. I'm just thrown off by that now. Where are the Jacksonville Jaguars going to play this year? Just doing a trial season in London, maybe. But
They're playing
um,
twice in London. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, there's plenty of opportunities for Georgia to have an oopsie game, but I think the odds, if you're telling me, pulling up their over under right now on DraftKings, it's right there at 11.5. So you have to bet, are they going to lose 2 regular season games? For my money, I'm not betting that they're going to lose 2 regular season games. And that the odds on favorite at minus 150 is agreeing with that.
Yeah. Quick fact check. So it's actually the 2025-2026 seasons that are in
Gotcha. Okay.
danger. So the first report that I read didn't have a date. So I'm realizing I just jumped the gun and assumed it was this season. Coupled with the fact that Jacksonville is playing multiple games in London, which is hilarious. That team can never catch a break as far as the London series.
Well, they sign
So
up
anyway,
for it. From what I've heard, they sign up for it because
yeah.
they have so much trouble filling their home stadium. So they just sign up to the NFL, say, "Hey, send us to London. We actually have a pretty good fan base in London because we play there every year." And so they're more
Poor
likely
Trevor
to get
Lawrence.
a sold out crowd across the pond than they are in their home stadium. Maybe that'll
Poor
change now that Trevor Lawrence and those guys are winning football games, but
You,
We'll
you would
see.
hope, right? You would
Yeah.
hope.
That
Uh,
Georgia, just going back to that Georgia schedule real quick. I mean, they don't leave the state of they don't leave home until September 30th when they play at Auburn.
mhm.
Their first, you know, road game against a winning team from last year isn't until that game at Tennessee on November 18th. So sure, there could be a trap game. They are playing that neutral site game against Florida on October 28th, it looks like. But even the home road splits this year just seem very, very favorable. From the West, they catch Auburn and Ole Miss. I mean, after Ole Miss's close to the season last year, I don't think that you're necessarily shaking your boots to play the Rebels. So,
Right.
I mean, and that game's at home. So, not a lot of opportunities to lose. One, definitely not a lot of opportunities to lose. Two, if everything clicks like we think it will.
I feel a little bit better about Auburn this year, and we've talked about it. They've got a lot of young talent. They're rebuilding the trenches. They just got a legit quarterback in Peyton Thorne. Meanwhile, at Ole Miss, you just dismissed Chris Marshall from the team, so your wide receiver core just took a hit. You've got Quinshon Judkins, which is great, but you brought in 3 transfer quarterbacks to compete with Jackson Dart. And so when you talk about a case of too many cooks in the kitchen, I mean, the saying is if you have 2 quarterbacks, do you even have one? What are you supposed to do if you have 4 quarterbacks? I mean, Kiffin's going to be like going to the bullpen mid first quarter if Dart or whoever wins the opening day job isn't getting it done.
Yeah, I have no idea what he's doing running that program
Do you,
in
do
Oxford. It
you have like
seems
an opener, a middle innings guy, and then a closer? Like, what are we doing here?
it could be revolutionary. It could fail spectacularly. It's going to be one of those two with Lane Kiffin. We know that much. It'll either be game changing that everyone raves about forever, or it's going to fail spectacular and he's looking for a new job sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Well, okay, so Georgia, I feel like the absolute floor is 1 loss, right? I mean, I feel like the floor is 1 loss. It depends who that loss comes to, but to me, unless it's to Tennessee outright, I think they're making the SEC East or the SEC championship as the contender out of the East, and they're probably going on to make the playoff. You would assume. I mean, just from where I sit, I don't know that anybody in the West stacks up on paper as good as Georgia does.
Gracious, how about